Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Andrew Chappell, and thank you very much for attending my webinar on sports injuries. So, just a little bit about myself for those who don't know me before I start. I am a doctor of nutrition and I am a practitioner in sports nutrition. I work with lots of different athletes, strongmen, bodybuilders, triathletes, powerlifters, rugby players, mainly strength and power sports though, and I'm also a competitive bodybuilder myself and a published researcher in the area of bodybuilding studies and strongman studies as well. So I coach lots of different athletes, and sports injuries is a common topic that comes up when we work with different people, and how you can manage these different injuries is an important topic of conversation. If you want to find out anything more about myself and sports injuries, be sure to check out my website www.ProPrepCoaching.com, and you can also find me on Instagram at Fueled by Scott Soates. Without any further ado, though, then let's get into this. This is going to be a short webinar discussion. It's going to be about 15 minutes, not overly heavy on the technical details, so it should be easy enough for even the layman to interpret. So let's get on to this then. So this is injuries in physique sports. So the goal of this particular seminar, different things that I think are important to learn around this topic are: what is the actual prevalence of sports injuries, what the common injuries are, what do you do if you get an injury, and then how can you prevent yourself getting an injury in the future. So really important topics here. Okay, so first off, I just sort of bring your attention to this nice study here by Hootman, published back in 2007, and it is the injury rate per 1,000 athletes, and it is related to practice and in relation to game time here. And you can see where it says men's football, that's American football, down at the bottom here, and here we've got soccer and wrestling. But what you can see here is that injuries are fairly common in sports that are more contact, and then less common in the non-contact sports from here. And it's also fairly apparent that the strength and power sport, such as the American football, causes the highest amount of injuries. So you're more likely to get injured in a sport like this. This is more a cross-section of American sports. You can imagine sports like rugby also being fairly high up on the list as well. When it comes to bodybuilding, though, bodybuilding is a fairly safe activity. It's a fairly safe pursuit, and you can see the injury rate is around about 0.12 to 0.7 injuries per year, or 0.24 to 1 injury per 1,000 hours of lifting. So it's not particularly high. You're looking at around about 1 to 7 injuries that someone's going to get in 10 years. And an important point that this Keogh and Winwood make is that there seems to be no difference in injury rates between men and women. The standard, so people that are at a lower level versus a higher level, or in terms of body weight class as well. So obviously some people are going to be more susceptible. Some people go through their whole careers getting very few, and then some people are more injury prone. Shoulders, lower back, knees, elbows, wrists, hands, these are the most common injuries that people typically get. Strains and sprains, and I'm going to come and talk about them in a minute, and that's really what we're going to be talking about in this particular seminar. Those are the most common ones per year. Back and shoulder issues, I think, are probably the most common ones that I've seen different people get throughout the career. But this list here is fairly consistent with various different things that I've seen. Rotator cuffs and lower back, as I say, they are the most common ones that people typically get. When it comes to championship bodybuilding, so when you're getting super lean, like me and my partner here in this particular image, I think the risk of injury goes up significantly. And there's lots of different reasons for that. But athletes that are trying to push themselves to the limit. So they're really walking that tightrope between making improvements in muscle gains and muscle mass on the one side, and then risking injury on the other side. So they're looking to push themselves with the amount of weight that they can lift in the gym. They're always trying to do that extra rep all the time, and because of this can often lead to technique suffering, being compromised, particularly where people have low calorie diets, and particularly with low body fat levels, and this often leads to recovery. So, not recovery, to injuries. So people end up snagging things or getting niggles that they otherwise would never have got in the off season. Particularly since the low body fat levels, typically it leads to lower cushioning and surrounding around these joints. You've got more hydration around there, and people are less likely to be nutrient deficient as well at the same time, and nutrient deficiencies can lead to injuries. Overuse injuries, as you can imagine, are common, and it says people get really lean and really close to the competition. That's probably where you've got your highest risk of injury. Post competition, people tend to go gung ho, and they try to get back in the gym immediately to lift what they were doing in the off-season phase, and people can hurt themselves in that particular period as well. And certainly I've been fallen foul of that in the past myself, trying to do too much too soon, and it ends up leading to an injury. So most injury-inducing exercises, well, unsurprisingly, in my experience, and I'm sure you can go find a paper on this, it is the multi-joint complex movements, which are the ones that typically people tend to do themselves in on the most. So deadlift, in my experience, that's probably the number one exercise where people are going to hurt themselves. Usually down to poor technique, poor form, rounding off the back, using too much weight, just poor technique. Things like other Olympic lifting movements, so snatches, clean and jerks, these often again high injury rate associated with them, just these sort of jerking movements in general. But squats as well, movements like that, bench press, just really anything where you can put a higher amount of load on the body, and it's not a fixed weight, so it leads to a more likelihood that something can go wrong. Machines typically tend to be safer, and as people get closer to competitions or more tired throughout their sessions, a recommendation of moving towards perhaps more safer exercises is probably a good strategy, and certainly reducing the amount of weight that you're lifting as you get closer to a competition is very often a good strategy as well. Injuries themselves, well, what is an actual injury? People might be asking themselves. So very often an injury is quite simply damage to the body. So from damage to the body, that's the regular cellular structure that you can see here. So this is a ligament in this case here. It's got this nice honeycomb cross structure, perfectly normal, but then as gaps and tears and holes start to appear in this, we start to get pain, and we start to get an injury occurring here. And then with any injury, very often that leads to inflammation. With the inflammation, you get a reduced range of motion, and we've all been there, whereby you can't move your hand or you stub your toe, and you can't move it quite as much as you'd like. You get swelling, so water starts to pool around the area, inflammation starts to go there, it's hot to the touch. People get reduced range of motion, they get restricted mobility, and you get an inability to use the joint. And this is really what an injury is. The example I've got here, this is, as I say, this is a ligament. We call ligament injuries sprains, and we call tendon injuries, they tend to be called strains, or rather are called strains. Grade 1 is something that you might do in the gym, sort of like a micro tear. Might actually not be that bad. A little bit of rest, avoiding that particular exercise for a week, and you might be okay. Grade 2, slightly more serious, likely to be quite painful. That's going to take a little bit longer to recover from. Could be, say, anything up to 4 weeks. And then you can see you've got here a complete sprain, this is a complete tear, and grade 3, this could be requiring surgery and take much longer to recover from if it can be recoverable at all. So there's different degrees in here, and anyone that's had an injury, they'll know that they can last a couple of days, they can last weeks, or they can be chronic, and you might have to manage it throughout the rest of your career, depending on what the issue actually is. So what's actually happening then? Well, with any injury, you get that initial inflammation period, and I've got this nice schematic here on the other side here. So what you can see here is you've got what is obviously a damaged tendon or damaged ligament in here, or maybe even a muscle fiber, and you can see immediately you get the pooling of cells attracted to the actual site itself. And what happens is you get a process called phagocytosis, and your body looks to try and clear up any damage and debris which is around that particular area. So mopping up any fragments that shouldn't be there. So that's the sort of first step of the injury repair as well. There's lots of cellular debris. Cells have split their materials and their fluids all around that area. So you get a lot of swelling going on in the area, and you get a lot of swelling of cells turning up, sending different signals, cytokines we call them, to a particular area, telling us to attract other cells to the area so that we can occur sort of a repair of the actual issue itself. So that's what's happening here. You can see you've got the swelling around the area, more cells are turning up around here, working towards repairing that particular damaged area that's there and mopping up anything that's going on around there. You've also got other cells there telling cells that are partially damaged to potentially die. We call this apoptosis, and other cells telling them not to die. So there's a sort of consistent balance between sort of this anti-inflammatory and pro-inflammatory profile going on at the same sort of time. Now, you obviously need a degree of inflammation going on around here, so you get the pooling of the cells around the area, you get the repair of the damaged site as well. However, not all inflammation is good, and where the inflammation continues to be ongoing, you can get what we call secondary damage, and the inflammation can actually lead to additional damage of healthy cells around the area and healthy tissue. So it might start breaking down some damage around, or some healthy tissue around here, and what is essentially good ligament and tendon, rather than focusing all its efforts on here. So controlled inflammation is a concept that physiotherapists talk about, and it's an important thing to get under control, really, in the initial phases of any particular sports injury. How we do that is something called the Rice Principle, and the use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So ice is extremely powerful stuff. If you've never used it for an injury, it's certainly something that you should do. And certainly with any injury, the process works like this. So initially, we look to rest the injury immediately. So we don't want to be doing anything around that site because we don't want it potentially causing more damage. The ice itself, we want to try and use 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off, and you want to try and do that, say, 4 to 8 times per day. At very least, although doing 20 minutes on and off, I've known people to do it in intervals all day, and it has been extremely effective. And what that ice will do is that will reduce any excess swelling and inflammation around the area, so that it's all targeted to the actual site itself, which requires it. Compression is very important. That can not only provide a little bit of support around the area when it's not able to function quite as well as it might like to, but also can help reduce some of the swelling as well. Although compression in the time post initial 48 hours is a very useful idea as well. And thereafter, some elevation is good as well. Again, to pull any excess fluid swelling away from that particular area as well. The NSAIDs, they'll do the same job as the ice essentially, and their job is to get that inflammation under control from there. So the first sort of 4 days of any sort of injury, this is what we want to be trying to do where we possibly can. We rest immediately. Thereafter, we're icing for the days that follow, and we're using the NSAIDs thereafter that. After that, once we've got that inflammation under control, it can be a good idea to actually apply a little bit of heat onto that particular area. So we've got all the detritus out of the way, we've got all the inflammation which isn't helpful out of the way. The problem with ligaments and tendons is though they have particularly poor blood flow. So this is where heat patches, or if you want just a low-tech solution, a hot water bottle, can be very useful. And what that does is causes your capillaries to open up. That then allows more blood to flow towards the area, and then that can reduce any, or rather allow more of the cells to get in there and to activate and to do the job that they want to do. You also get yourself a little bit of pain reduction at the same time, and that also allows you to often get a better range of motion as well. And that's where things like deep heat gels can be very useful as well at the same time. So some compression should continue though as well alongside potential heat as well. You can fix something onto yourself if you've got like a band-aid, and incidentally you can do the same with some ice. If possible, massage and physiotherapy within the first 12 to 24 hours could be a good idea, but it's always worth getting advice from the physiotherapist or your sports masseur as to what they believe is the best idea to do within that sort of period of time. Certainly within the first week, you want to potentially see if you can get some massage on a particular area. It might not be something like a sprain or a strain, it could just simply be something that you've pulled, and then just some work on it might remove some knotting and allow you to get back to full health and full speed as quick as possible. But long term, certainly with any sort of injury, what can happen is you build up this scar tissue, and where once you had this nice perfect structure to your muscle tissue, you end up with clumps and knots in the area, and breaking down that scar tissue can help you have that superior range of motion that you once had before, because this is not potentially as strong as before, not necessarily as mobile as what you had before. So sports injury, very useful thing to go and do, and the more you can get this done, the better for prehab as well. Nutrition, there's lots of different people out here suggesting that nutrition could play an important role in managing sports injuries, and I think some of them have got very good points. Main things we really need to focus on with sports nutrition though around injuries is making sure we've got sufficient protein, which very often isn't an issue for most bodybuilders and athletes. However, around about 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, so making sure you're getting enough of that. Omega-3 fatty acids, again, often make up a component of people's diet, but if you're not, some fish in the diet, particularly oily fish, or taking on board some fish oil capsules is a good idea. Micronutrients like vitamin C play an important role in tendon formation because of their role in collagen synthesis. Antioxidants, potentially useful because of the amount of oxidative stress which is caused around an area when we get any sort of injury. But generally speaking, the advice is just to follow a healthy balanced diet like you otherwise would be following, and then to potentially reduce your energy intake, whereby you have to reflect the new energy output levels that you have. Particularly if you're immobile, you'll not be doing as much. So excess weight gain is obviously not a good idea. If you want to read more about this, incidentally, you can go and read this paper at the bottom here. In terms of injury prevention, number of things that you can do. First off, remember, pain is a cue. And if something hurts, and I'm tired of telling this to my clients who just push through pain barriers all the time, don't do it. Just stop the exercise. Very often there's a workaround or something else you can do. Certain exercises are notorious, things like skull crushers, for example, behind the neck press. If you're noticing that these sort of things give you issues around the shoulder joint, around the elbows, then you can always find a different way to, a different exercise you can do, and you can always get a good workout regardless of those other exercises being in your plan. Work on your technique. Poor technique causes injuries. If you've got poor technique, you might get away with it for a period of time, but as soon as you start to put more and more weight on bars, you'll start to notice that you'll be more likely to develop injuries from here. So make sure that you're lifting with good technique always. Generally speaking, if you jerk things around, do movements too quickly, and without control, this is where you're more likely to risk injury. When your body fat levels are low, Always try your best to potentially avoid doing exercises again that potentially are going to harm you. You might want to consider changing the rep ranges as well. You might want to do advanced training techniques and start to do more things like pre-exhausting, drop sets, more things like rest, pause, and avoid just doing things like straight sets or negatives, which have maybe got a higher propensity to lead to injury. Rest is important, so making sure that you rest regularly, taking deloads when you need to take deloads, and that you're not overtraining is very important. You don't need to train 6 days per week with weights, particularly if you're a natural bodybuilder. You might not recover. Warming up and cooling down properly, I think that's obvious. Stretching and doing your prehab work. So the more flexible you are, the less likely you are to encounter an injury. So yoga and Pilates is great. There's plenty of useful yoga and Pilates videos on YouTube you can check out. Get regular massage, and you can stop those niggles from becoming injuries as well. So this is what we can do to prevent our injuries. If you get an injury, trick is to keep calm and have a plan. So it might not be as bad as you've seen. That's probably the first thing I would say. But things to consider: immediately ice the area. Take some NSAIDs. You want to be taking the ice on for about 20 minutes on and off. You can do that for 4 to 8 hours. It works very well. Book sports massages if it's believed to be appropriate, and then aim to get treatments as regularly as you can, and take advice on that as well. If the physio recommends doing more, then it will be worth doing more. Compress the site of injury, and then after 5 days, if the swelling's reduced, then continue to take your NSAIDs but apply heat. Compress, continue with that for at least 2 weeks, attend a physiotherapist, and then implement your rehabilitation and your prehab exercises into your regime, and plan so that you don't end up getting these injuries again in the future. Other things worth considering: you'll see a lot of people wearing knees and knee wraps, belts, knee sleeves, all very useful for helping people have that little bit of extra support when they're lifting in the gym, particularly when we're lifting these super physiological loads. But remember, these things are only there just to support you. And if you can, build the strength up in your tendons and in your ligaments and your joints without the equipment, because you'll be far, far stronger than if you have to use potential equipment. And try not to use these things as a crutch. Like I say, useful if you've got niggles or old injuries, but we should always be trying to overcome these things, and be wary of equipment which is double, single and triple ply. Things like these knee wraps, or people even wear these things for knee sleeves. When you start using these bits of equipment, then you start to lift beyond what the normal function of your body would be, even when you're wearing these knee sleeves, knee wraps, etc. For example, a pair of these knee sleeves, you could put probably 20 to 30 kilograms on your best squat. So you can see how that might potentially increase the chance of injury. Very specialist pieces of equipment though, and certainly I know lots of strong men and power bodybuilders that would use this equipment as well. But certainly try and build up the strength in your ligaments and your tendons so you don't need these things. Okay, just a few references here as part of this presentation. You can go and check them out in your own time. And then the last thing I'd just like to say is thank you very much for your attention. Be sure to check out the ProPrep Instagram. Check out our WNBF UK website as well. That's the World Natural Bodybuilding Federation. I'm Fueled by Scott Soates on Instagram, and we've got the websites down here below at the bottom. Hopefully you enjoyed this presentation, and hopefully it gives you some more ideas on how you can tackle injuries in the future and what to do if you do come up against another one. All right, thanks for your attention, folks. Ciao.